can do this. This isn't anything impressive. And he was the one who hardened his heart seeing this, thinking that's really nothing big. Beyond the first 5, that's when a lot of people start to believe that's when God started hardening his heart. So from the 6th on. And there's only so much sympathy you can feel for him. He had 5 chances to turn back. If you follow this train of thought, 5 chances to change his mind, 5 chances to give it up. And he decided to stay stubborn. And the more a man's heart hardens, the less freedom he has to change. I'm sure we all know someone who's got really stuck in their old ways, doing something bad, and after so long, you can't change it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Once you get stuck in your old ways, it's really hard to change. And the more stubborn you are about that, the harder it is to change, the less freedom you have. Now, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart had to have happened, especially after the first 5, because we needed that adversity. The Jews needed that adversity. And we know diamonds are formed under pressure. The only way we could have the big change from having the slave mindset being in Egypt to being free after the Exodus was if we went through these adversities. And I like to call that the transformative power of adversity. It often takes facing overwhelming odds to make a radical change. Now, I want to talk about one of the plagues specifically, the plague of darkness. I find this one really interesting. I think it's my favorite. I just think it's like such a cool concept, like a darkness you can feel. Like that's just something you read in like a comic book or something. Now, we know that all the plagues had a double meaning. There was the plague and how it related to Egypt and their gods. The plague of darkness was a major one because Egypt, one of their foundations of their belief is the power of the sun god. So imagine how shocked they were when for 3 days that sun is shut off. Like, it just feels like your God has really abandoned you. It's like, wow, the Jews' God might be real, like, because we never seen something like this happen before. And it's really interesting thinking that the last 3 plagues all kind of tie together. You have the plague of the locust, which there were so many of them, they were blocking out the sky, the ground, everything. After that, we have the plague of the darkness, which was so heavy that it filled the air. Continual darkness from the locust to the plague of darkness. And then the third, the death of the firstborn, seeing this destruction come in the midst of the darkness. Just really hitting the Egyptians at their lowest point. And it really just goes to show how serious God was about this. These are 3 plagues of utter despair. Now, speaking on the harshness of the plagues, there's some people might wonder, why did all the Egyptians have to get punished, especially with the death of the firstborn, where it says from the Pharaoh's firstborn to the firstborn of the people in the jails, going from the most guilty to the least guilty. A lot of people are like, wow, what about the innocents? Like, why do they have to be punished about this? Thinking, corporal punishment isn't fair. Like, I'm sure we all felt that before. Corporal punishment sucks, especially in school. Now, one of the things you have to consider is that when God's fury is fully unleashed, all moral distinctions collapse. We see this in Sodom and Gomorrah, where before like the negotiations happened, God was ready to completely wipe out the town regardless of who was there. We see this again with the flood, who if you weren't on that boat, you were getting wiped out. And we see this with the plagues. If you were associated with them, you were getting wiped out. Once this destruction comes, no one is safe, good or bad. And there's a lot to think about there. It's like, wow, is God just that uncaring? Now, the corporate punishment may seem wrong, but our fates ultimately fall on the shoulders of our leaders, which is why we're told to pray for our leaders. And we see that a lot in the Bible. When the Jews are really hit with something bad, a lot of times the ones who are warned are their leaders. And if they don't fix it, it's ruined for everyone. Now, continuing with the thought about the corporate punishment, I know the mindset is, why should I be punished for what they're doing? Why should I be punished for this or that? And it really goes back to the whole conversation of, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you are. the lack of responsibility that the mindset comes with, where why should I be responsible for this if I didn't do it, it really contributes to distancing ourselves from other people. And it's allowed atrocities to take place without protest. If we think we're not responsible for anything going on, we're not going to stand up for anything. We think we're the only ones we have to care about. We're in a world with 7 billion other people. You have to be responsible for each other. Now, with this punishment, you can't assume that we're safe by principle rather than by practice. You aren't going to be safe just because you're God's chosen people. You need to walk in your faith to earn being safe from any punishments that may come your way, the curses and the blessings. You need to actively walk it out. Being passive rarely will get you anywhere. And to be silent in the face of injustice is to be implicated in the act itself. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is what really makes a miracle? Because I know that's another fun conversation. And we see miracles such as the crossing of the Red Sea are important, but not so much the miracle itself, but because they help us recognize the smaller miracles. I know it's really easy nowadays to feel like God is an inactive God, and that all the stories in the Old Testament are so far off. But all these major miracles, or if all these major miracles were common, there wouldn't really be anything miraculous about them. If the splitting of the Red Sea happens every other week, you would just knock it up to a natural phenomenon. It's not God. They have to be rare to be special and to be miracles. Now, the important part of these miracles isn't so much the miracle itself, these major miracles, but what they represent. And our job is to remember the overt miracles so that we can appreciate the covert miracles. The fact that the sun rises every day is no less of a miracle than the crossing of the Red Sea. We need to remember these major ones to really be appreciative of these minor ones. And that mindset was really applicable in the story of Exodus too. A miracle in itself was, wow, I'm so glad we aren't being hit by these plagues. Now, the fact that we're here to recall the Exodus is another miracle in and of itself. Beyond the theatrics of the Exodus is what the Exodus represented. We can't get so caught up in all the fancy fireworks going on, the pyrotechnics, to really remember what they represented, which was that God was here for us and the promise we made with him. And that's all I really got for today.